Pope Leo's latest move has left Catholics around the world in shock. For many, what has just happened is not a rumor, not speculation, but a concrete act that touches the very heart of the Catholic faith. It is not just another church debate or small adjustment in policy. It is something that many faithful see as a decisive step, one that confirms the direction of this new pontificate. For Catholics who love and defend tradition, this moment feels heavy, even painful. What has happened in Rome is already marking Pope Leo's time in office, and many are beginning to ask whether this is the beginning of an even more difficult and challenging phase for those who remain loyal to the ancient liturgy, the Mass. Of the centuries, the question on everyone's mind is clear. What will be the fate of the traditional Latin Mass? For years, this has been at the center of controversy, restrictions, and conflict. Under Pope Francis, the motu proprio tradition is custodes and its applications created some of the harshest limitations on the ancient rite in modern history. Entire communities that had lived, prayed, and thrived around the Latin Mass suddenly found themselves under pressure. They faced closures, limits, bureaucratic barriers, and decisions that seemed designed not to guide them with fatherly care, but to suffocate their very existence. And yet, something unexpected happened. Wow. Modern parishes with guitars and casual liturgies continued to empty. The traditional Mass drew large families, young people, and converts. People who were searching for silence, sacredness, and truth found it not in the so-called modern liturgies, but in the old rite that had formed countless saints for centuries. In the chapels where the ancient Mass was celebrated, one could see new life, vocations growing, conversions taking place, faith being strengthened. Meanwhile, in so many parishes where the new model was promoted, the opposite happened. Pews sat empty, seminaries closed, convents were sold or turned into hotels. The contrast became more and more striking, and the faithful could see with their own eyes where life was and where decline was. This is why every decision by Pope Leo is being watched closely. Catholics want to know if he will defend tradition, or if he will continue on the path of suppression. At first, when Pope Leo was elected, he made statements that seemed diplomatic. He said he wanted to continue along the path of unity, much like his predecessor had promised. Many people thought these were simply words of courtesy, respectful to Francis, but not binding. They hoped that once Pope Leo was in power, he would open new doors, bring healing, and restore what had been wounded. But now the facts are becoming clear. The spotlight is not on vague words, but on real decisions. And the signals coming from Rome cannot be ignored. The first concrete confirmation has now arrived, and it comes from a place that few expected, New Zealand, in Christchurch. Since 2014, there has been a thriving community linked to the Latin Mass, the Sons of the Most Holy Redeemer. This group had grown strong, with young vocations and families. They were not divisive. They were not breaking unity. They were simply living their faith according to the ancient tradition of the Church. When they were suddenly expelled by Bishop Michael Gillen, they believed they could appeal to Rome. Surely the new Pope, they thought, would see the injustice and correct it. Surely Pope Leo, as the universal shepherd, would show mercy and give them protection. But the opposite happened. On August 10th, their appeal was rejected. The Holy See supported the bishop without hesitation. What could have been a sign of hope turned into a bitter confirmation. Rome itself confirmed the expulsion, and in doing so, the message was sent loud and clear. There will be no change, no reversal, no mercy for those communities tied to the old Mass. This decision shocked Catholics across the world because it was not just about one community in New Zealand. It was symbolic. It was a test. Everyone was waiting to see if Pope Leo would break from the harsh line of Francis, or if he would continue it. Now the answer is undeniable. Continuity is complete. The new Pope is walking the same road, and tradition is still the target. For many, the comparison with history is not an exaggeration. When entire communities are suppressed, simply because they remained faithful to the liturgy of centuries, it recalls the dark days of persecution. Some even compare it to the days of Henry VIII, when monks who remained faithful to Rome were hunted and destroyed. But the difference is haunting. Today, the ones expelling religious communities are not Protestants, not enemies from outside, but the Catholic hierarchy itself. A shocking contradiction that reveals just how deep the hostility toward the ancient liturgy has become. Observers call it diabolical. Why else would there be such fury against a form of the Mass that hurts no one, that harms nothing? but instead inspires vocations, conversions, and strong Catholic families? Why else would bishops and dicasteries show such determination to eliminate something that is producing good fruits while ignoring the collapse happening in their own diocese? The answer is frightening, and many faithful cannot help but see it as a spiritual battle, where hatred for tradition is being allowed to dominate the actions of those in power. And the New Zealand case is not isolated. It is only one piece of a much larger pattern. In the United States, similar battles are being fought. In Charlotte, North Carolina, a shocking scandal unfolded. Parents discovered that Catholic schools were exposing children to material filled with blasphemy, sacrilegious images, and even sexually explicit content. These parents, acting with love for their children and concern for their faith, protested. They asked for the dangerous content to be removed instead of being listened to. Instead of being protected, their children were punished. The schools expelled them without warning. Catholics thought surely the bishop would defend the parents, but Bishop Michael Martin did the opposite. He supported the school. He stood against the families and backed the expulsion of innocent children. For many Catholics, this was an unbearable betrayal. Parents were treated like criminals for doing what God Himself commands, protecting their children from corruption. In Detroit, Archbishop Edward Weissenberger showed another disturbing example of this pattern. On one hand, he restricted the celebration of the traditional Mass, taking away the spaces where the faithful could gather in the ancient liturgy. On the other hand, he promoted priests tied to openly heretical groups, even those who supported female ordination and other grave errors. Among them, Father David Biersmeyer, who had openly signed letters backing priests excommunicated for liturgical abuses, was raised to positions of power. The faithful who loved tradition were punished. The priests who supported error were rewarded. The message could not be clearer. This is not about unity. This is not about care. This is a purge. It is a systematic attempt to silence, isolate, and eventually erase Catholic tradition. It is not accidental. It is not random. It is a strategy. Bishops are being appointed, not to shepherd the faithful, but to carry out this project. The goal seems to be to normalize error and relegate tradition to the margins until it disappears. And yet, despite the discouragement, despite the pain, despite decisions that break hearts, there remains one certainty. The model of liberalism in the Church has failed. For decades, Catholics were told that the new way was the only way. They were told that guitars, casual worship, endless dialogue, and compromise with the world would bring people back. They were told that openness without limits would save the Church. But the results are plain for all to see: empty parishes, closed seminaries, religious houses abandoned, vocations dried up. The fruit of this path is not life, but death, and no amount of propaganda can hide it anymore. Progressive bishops keep repeating the same slogans, but the faithful are no longer convinced. They see the reality with their own eyes. They see where the Church is dying and where it is alive. And it is alive in tradition. It is alive in the silence of the Rosary. It is alive in families that pass on the faith to their children. It is alive in the chapels where the Mass of the Ages is celebrated. Where reverence and beauty bring people close to God, the truth is clear. Structures built on compromise with the world are crumbling. They cannot last because they are not built on the rock of Christ. The end of this era of false reform is not just an opinion. It is a reality happening before our eyes. The future belongs not to liberalism, but to faith, silence, reverence, and tradition. So, while these decisions may cause pain, while the faithful may feel abandoned or betrayed by their shepherds, the truth remains unshakable. God is still raising up life in the places where tradition is preserved. The persecution of the ancient liturgy may intensify. The bishops may suppress communities. Rome itself may reject appeals. But the Mass will not die. The faith will not die. Families, young people, and faithful priests will keep it alive because it is not theirs to destroy. It belongs to God, and God always preserves what is